Today I'm talking about a car everyone loves. Right behind me is the BRZ. It's the new generation. This one was built in 2022. It has about 50,000 kilometers on it now. The front tires were manufactured in 2021. The rear tires are from 2024. So why were the rear tires replaced after only 2 years? I think you already know the answer. I don't need to explain. If you're on the fence about buying a BRZ, then you've clicked on the right video. It's blazing hot today. It's 36 degrees. I'm roasting out here. Let's get inside the car. There's honestly not much to say about the exterior, because you see these everywhere now. Much better. Okay, the BRZ comes with keyless entry. If the key is in your pocket, just walk up and pull the door handle. If you've never been in a BRZ before, you're probably not familiar with the interior. So let's go over the features in detail. First, it has power windows. Both the driver and passenger windows have auto switches. They're one-touch controls. It also has power folding mirrors, a multifunction steering wheel, cruise control, an infotainment system, dual-zone automatic climate control, and heated seats. For a proper sports car, I'd say that's a pretty solid equipment list. The gauge cluster is completely different from the old model. It's fully digital. You get much more information. You can even set your own shift warning. It'll alert you at your chosen RPM. You can set it to 7,000, 6,000, or even 2,000 revolutions per minute. I guess that's for when your engine is about to give up and you're limping it to the repair shop. Since this is a manual, you get 3 pedals. The brake and throttle are close together, making heel and toe downshifts easy. So once you buy this car, you'll have plenty to keep you entertained. Just mastering drifting and heel and toe takes ages. The infotainment itself isn't anything special. By today's standards, it's ancient. The one thing I like is that it supports Apple CarPlay. It's like someone hands you an old record player. You don't really want to use it, then suddenly discover there's a USB port hidden on the back that lets you play digital music. It's an unexpectedly nice surprise. Subaru also has a long-standing tradition. In the infotainment menu, you can enter your birthday and anniversaries. It's not buried deep inside some complicated menu either. It's actually very easy to find. When your birthday or anniversary arrives, the car will actually celebrate it with you. Why? Because Subaru doesn't want a car to feel like a cold, lifeless machine. They want it to have a little bit of personality. Does that create a huge amount of emotional value? Probably not. But I still appreciate that nerdy engineer kind of romance. Now let's talk about the transmission. You get 6 forward gears and 1 reverse. To engage reverse, you pull up the collar first. Once you're in reverse, you also get a backup camera with parking guidelines. It's beginner-friendly. There are also 2 buttons here that basically give you 3 different driving modes. A quick press on the left button disables TRC. Hold it, and it turns off VSC as well. In plain English, a short press partially disables ESP, while a long press turns it off completely. Totally. So what's the difference between TRC and VSC? TRC stands for Traction Control System. It mainly manages the drive wheels. If you want the rear wheels to spin during a launch, just switch it off. Once you're moving, its intervention is much less noticeable. VSC stands for Vehicle Stability Control. It doesn't just manage the drive wheels. It also controls the brakes on all four wheels and helps stabilize the car. Simply put, TRC is basically a basic version of VSC. So what happens when you disable them? I recorded a short clip. Both runs were done at about the same speed. See if you can spot the difference. Pretty obvious, right? Now let's talk about track mode. Go. Hold the button. And you'll notice only the ESP off light comes on. That means VSC is disabled, but TRC is still active. So it still leaves a bit of a safety net in place. And it has a pretty long clutch travel. Pressing it halfway won't do anything. You really have to push it all the way to the floor. That's the only way you'll get the car moving. So if you're new to the manual BRZ, it might take some getting used to, but after you've driven it for a while, you'll gradually get the hang of it. Actually, a lot of manual sports cars have heavy clutches. That's because they use stronger, more durable clutch discs, along with stiffer springs and pressure plates. The extra clamping force keeps the power from slipping. That's why the clutch feels heavier. A race car's clutch is even heavier. Most of them don't even have clutch assist. So compared to those, the BRZ isn't bad. But in today's EV era, its power does feel a little lacking. It does 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in about 7 seconds. These days, almost any EV can outrun it, which makes its manual transmission even more valuable. That said, the manual gearbox isn't perfect. The throw is nice and short, but it doesn't have that satisfying notchiness. It feels a little notchy, especially when the car is brand new. If you're a beginner or your shifting isn't great, you might occasionally miss a gear. It just needs some break-in time. If your driving is good enough, after a few tens of thousands of kilometers, it'll be much smoother. The gauge cluster also has a shift indicator arrow to tell you when to upshift. It feels just like playing a racing game. So is driving a manual fun? Well, it depends. If you're on a twisty road with few traffic lights and very little traffic, it's absolutely a blast. But in the opposite situation, not so much. Especially in heavy traffic, a manual can make you question your life choices. Especially in a BRZ. If traffic is crawling and you're constantly feathering the clutch, you're in trouble. It's an absolute nightmare. By the time you get out, your left leg will be shot. You can barely even walk. So if someone buys an automatic BRZ, don't make fun of them. It's probably not because they can't drive stick. It's because of how they use the car. Most of their driving is city commuting, just using it as a daily driver, where traffic jams are common. They just want to enjoy the BRZ's steering and nimble handling without torturing their left leg. Now let's talk about the steering. The car itself is plenty agile and very responsive. What I mean is, the steering wheel's feel. I think it's just a little too light, and it lacks feedback. It's not like some European cars. Take BMW, for example. BMW has much better steering feedback. It feels solid in your hands, almost like it knows exactly what you want. But this one, it's definitely accurate, and better than most other Toyotas. But it still feels like something's missing. That said, it's still very refined. As for the brake pedal feel, it doesn't really feel like a sports car. Instead, it feels like it came from some regular Toyota. It's tuned for comfort, with a smooth, progressive bite. For everyday driving, it's perfectly fine. But if you're on a track, you'll need to brake earlier. Otherwise, it'll feel like it won't stop in time. Below 3,000 revolutions per minute, it feels underpowered, like an ordinary commuter car. But once you're above 3,000 or 4,000 revolutions per minute, it wakes up quite a bit. The new BRZ really didn't gain much horsepower over the old one, but its peak torque comes in much earlier. It's now around 3,700 to 3,800 revolutions per minute. With the older model, you pretty much had to rev it to 7,000 revolutions per minute. But I do have one complaint. Even at high RPM, the exhaust note is still pretty weak. That's not good. This definitely needs an upgrade. Otherwise, driving around town, it sounds like an old Toyota Celica. A regular grocery getter that just happens to look like a sports car. That just won't do. So an exhaust upgrade is a must. I bet aftermarket exhaust companies were thrilled to see this car. That said, Subaru probably did this to comply with regulations in different countries. Some countries, like France and Spain, introduced stricter exhaust noise regulations in 2021 to limit vehicle noise. It's the direction things are heading. And some other countries have similar rules too. The timing lined up perfectly with the launch of the new BRZ. So the factory exhaust was intentionally kept pretty quiet. That's just my guess though. The factory did offer a workaround. Fake engine sound. This speaker is what creates that fake sound. Once you rev it up, it actually sounds pretty aggressive. Deep and powerful. It really feels exciting. But it's fake. Outside the car, it's nowhere near as loud. What I don't understand is, why is there barely any sound at the 3,000 to 4,000 revolutions per minute range, where you spend most of your time driving? Well, it's not completely absent. It's just way too subtle. You can barely hear it. I think that's kind of disappointing. Who's driving around town at 6,000 or 7,000 revolutions per minute all day? So it still falls short of creating a sporty atmosphere. They should learn from the Italians. Now let's talk about the suspension. The suspension tuning is very well balanced. It feels like it's about 30% comfort and 70% sportiness. So when you drive it, most people will find it easy to live with. It's not the kind of suspension that feels like sitting on a rock. It's tuned to be just a bit firmer than a typical Toyota family car, with slightly better body control. It's still very easy to get comfortable with. It offers excellent support on smooth roads, whether you're changing lanes or carving through corners. The body support is excellent. The car itself is also very compact, which makes it feel like a proper sports car. The sports car character is definitely there. Now let's talk about NVH. As for vibration, it's actually pretty good. I think Toyota has always done a solid job. When it comes to vibration control, it's quite well managed. Sound insulation, though, is just average. The underbody insulation is even worse. It almost feels like there's no insulation underneath at all, probably to save weight. So no matter what tires you put on, road noise is always pretty noticeable. To drown it out, you pretty much have to turn on some music. But then there's another issue. The audio system has way too much bass. So whenever I drive this car, I turn the bass all the way down. That's the only way I can enjoy it. I think they tuned it that way for the North American market, since the BRZ and 86 sell mainly in the US. From the Americans I've met, a lot of them really like bass-heavy music. You know, that boom 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 kind of sound. They're really into it, but I'm very sensitive to bass, so I don't really enjoy that kind of sound. I've tested more than 300 different cars over the past decade or so, and fewer than 20% of them made me want to turn the bass all the way down. This is one of them. Finally, let's talk about fuel economy. Among sports cars, the BRZ is actually very fuel efficient, partly because the engine itself is efficient, and partly because the car is lightweight. It only weighs about 1.3 tons, so getting around 7L/100 km isn't unrealistic. But I think most BRZ owners like to drive a little more aggressively. So realistically, you'll probably see around 9L/100 km. Fuel isn't cheap, though. because it uses a high-compression engine with a 12.5 to 1 compression ratio. That's why the owner's manual strongly recommends premium fuel. Regular is only for emergencies. So if you're thinking about buying a BRZ, make sure your city has stations that sell premium gas. The BRZ really is an outstanding, affordable sports car. Other than being a bit down on power, whether it's track driving or drifting, everything exotic sports cars can do, it can do too. And it still retains the practicality of a daily driver. It's comfortable enough to drive to work every day. Look, I've driven almost 200 kilometers today. There was a long stretch where I wasn't talking to you guys. But after nearly 200 kilometers, honestly, I'm not even that tired. It also has huge tuning potential. There are well-developed aftermarket solutions for the BRZ and 86 worldwide. So how many rivals does such a well-rounded sports car really have? But before we wrap up, there's one important question. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Is the BRZ still worth buying in 2025? Why do I ask that? Because with the rise of EVs, if we're talking purely about handling, the BRZ is no longer the best choice in the $30,000 price range. Not long ago, I drove the SC01 in Tianjin. I spent nearly half an hour behind the wheel, and I think it absolutely blows the BRZ away in both power and handling. It makes the BRZ feel outdated almost instantly. Then there's the price. Don't even get me started. The SC01 costs a little over 230,000 yuan, while the BRZ is almost the reverse of those digits. I'm not hyping up the SC01. They didn't pay me anything. I'm just being honest. Once the SC01 becomes more common, I think used BRZs and 80 SIXS will probably see their prices come down. At that point, its only real advantage might be Toyota's reputation for reliability. That legendary bulletproof reliability. After all, newer brands don't have decades of manufacturing experience. So if reliability is your priority, the SC01 may not beat Toyota. Of course, that's just my guess, since the SC01 hasn't been delivered yet, so it's still too early to tell. But considering how far China's auto industry has come, is the BRZ's reliability really that important? How many people actually buy a BRZ and keep it for 20 years? I'm sure those people exist, but most sports car owners I know replace their cars every 2 or 3 years. That's because sports cars are basically toys. They're big toys for grown men. And toys, just like kids' toys, eventually lose their appeal. I'm not exaggerating. Let me ask you guys watching this. If you own a sports car, how often do you replace it? Have you kept one for 10 years? I guess even 5 years is uncommon. So is reliability really that important? With today's Chinese automakers, building a car that lasts 5 years without major issues isn't difficult at all. On top of that, a lot of BRZ owners love modifying their cars. They're always swapping parts, which makes the car more prone to problems. It's easier to upset the factory balance. Do you really think reliability is their priority? As for collectability, I don't think the BRZ quite has it. For one, it's not old enough, and it's not rare enough either. The Toyota 86 is a bit rarer, which is why used examples cost a little more. In fact, with cars in similar condition, the price difference can be as much as 100,000 yuan. So is the BRZ still worth buying today? My answer is, it depends. If you fall into one of these 3 categories, then I'd say go for it. First, if you have a deep love for JDM culture, especially if you're a huge fan of Initial D and the AE86, then buying a Toyota 86 is a great choice. Second, if you don't like EVs and want a traditional gasoline-powered sports car, but your budget is limited, then it's worth considering. And the third type is someone who, 10 or 15 years ago, dreamed of owning a BRZ or an 86, but was too young back then and couldn't afford one. Now, 10 years later, you're successful, and you finally have the money. I'd say go ahead and make that dream come true. So those are the 3 types of buyers. If you fit one of those categories, I think you'll have a great time owning this car. Alright, that's it for today's video. It's starting to get dark out. So I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.